I don't know if you've ever been a waiter or a waitress, but if you haven't, there's a point in every customer service job where your soul kind of leaves your body and you're forced to smile through something impossible. And every now and then, the mask cracks. People are being super rude to you, and most days you can handle it, but some days, for whatever reason, you just can't take it anymore. So my break, the point where I cracked happened at a restaurant called the Nom in Vancouver, Canada. It was like around 8:30 in the morning, roughly 1992, I'd say. And it involved me completely losing my mind and throwing a fistful of wet rice. So allow me to explain how this transpired. So back then, the Nom was Vancouver's very legendary 24-hour vegetarian restaurant. It still is, actually. It's still open. This was before Kitsilano, which is the neighborhood where it is, became one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Canada. And like back in those days, the area had more students and artists and hippies and activists, like people left over from the 60s who still lived there. Kind of just, people drifting around, a lot more young people. The restaurant itself had been there since the late 60s and had developed this ecosystem of vegetarians, regular customers, quite a number of whom were quite eccentric. So anyways, I worked the breakfast shift while I was a student at the University of British Columbia, just up the street. So my mornings in this restaurant were basically like, it was a busy place. I would be running pancakes back and forth, tofu scramble, very strong coffee, like industrial strength coffee. And like the very controversial, controversial in a vegetarian restaurant, plates of eggs back and forth, through a packed room, often with a lineup out the door, okay, just so you can picture it. Usually coated in maple syrup and muffin crumbs, and fueled by caffeine. So the customers there were quite unforgettable. Like there's a number of them that still stick in my mind. There was the man who would sit at a table all night long, chain smoking and staring into space, occasionally getting up to play like ragtime piano and then going and sitting back down. He chain smoked outside the restaurant, to be clear, but he would go out, have a cigarette, come in, play some ragtime, sit down for a little while, drink some coffee, get up and go rinse and repeat. And then there was another woman who liked to come in and sculpt elaborate shapes out of wet napkins and leave them behind on the table like these little monuments. And there was another woman who used to come in all the time who believed firmly that the salad dressing was poisonous, and she would quietly empty the bottles into the toilet whenever nobody was watching. So, and then there was the woman who used to come in and offer to clean and sparkle the salad bar for free, if you would give her like a meal or something like that. And like, none of this bothered me. There were a lot of halfway houses in the neighborhood. There were a lot of eccentrics, and these were known friendly weirdos, kind of. And you just kind of, as a waitress, you just kind of gave them a wide berth. The Nom definitely had this wide tolerance for human oddness, and so did I. And that was something I liked about the place. It actually made me feel comfortable. Had sort of a bit of an anything goes attitude. So anyways, the kitchen there was very small and permanently overwhelmed, like always backed up with orders. And the restaurant, therefore, had a reputation for slow service because everything took forever and nobody seemed particularly interested in rushing, And I must admit, there was one incident I recall, didn't involve me, but where the person who supplied whipped cream canisters, those little gas canisters that power whipped cream containers in restaurants, the person who sold those gas canisters came in and said that our little restaurant was going through more of these gas canisters than the giant kitchen at the Hotel Vancouver. And it turned out because they were full of nitrous oxide, so like the midnight staff were inhaling the whipped cream gas canisters. So this is the sort of place it was. It has to be admitted. Anyways, on this particular morning, the breakfast rush was in full swing. The coffee was flowing. The orders were piling up. The cook had already been there all night and looked like she gave absolutely zero shits, right? She just didn't care. She didn't care about you. She didn't care about your customers. She didn't care about breakfast. So right around like sort of the height of this breakfast rush, this man came in who I'd never seen before. And he sits down in the middle of my section. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So I hand him a menu. And he says, kind of rudely, he goes, I don't want anything on this menu. And I explained, politely that he was under no obligation if nothing appealed to him. And like for reasons I still do not fully understand, something about me deeply offended him. And he started accusing me of being rude. And so I remember I tried again, like I apologized and said, like, if there's nothing to your liking, I understand. That's okay. There's other choices in the neighborhood kind of thing. And finally, he just came out with it. He's like, well, I want a bowl of cheese and milk with rice. And so I kind of paused for a second, like trying to like mentally put together this culinary vision. Like, what is he actually asking me for? And then at this point, he's like, I know the owners. I've been coming here for years. I'd never seen him before, but he claimed to be a regular. He claimed to know the owners. So eventually I was like, whatever, I'm not paid to argue. I'm not paid enough to argue with this guy. So I walked back into the kitchen and I asked the cook whether she could make this weird off-menu request happen. And like without even looking up, she kind of like reached to the side into a pot of leftover cold gloppy rice, scooped a lump of it into a bowl, sprinkled some cheese from like the omelet prep area on top of the rice and threw the whole bowl under the broiler for a minute and then sort of shoved it towards me with this like exhausted fury. Whatever. It was the end of a long shift for her. So anyways, I take this little warm bowl of rice and cheese and I go back out to the gentleman and I say, here you go, sir, here's your cheese and rice. How would you like the milk? Because he had said a bowl of cheese and rice and milk. And he goes, what do you mean, how would I like the milk? And I was quite confused. I sort of said, well, I stammered, like, I just mean, like, do you want it poured on top? Do you want it heated? Do you want it on the side? And then something about my manner or the way I positioned the question just made him completely unravel. And he started swearing at me. He accused me of trying to ruin his breakfast with my disgusting terminology, quote unquote. He started shouting in the middle of the busy section, and I had other customers to deal with. And he declared that he wasn't going to pay for this slop, right? And he threatened to complain to the owners about my rudeness and stuff. So then, like, I think that's when the tiny little string that keeps your sanity together when you're a waitress and allows you to plaster on a smile just frickin' snapped. I just lost it. And I reached into the bowl with my bare hand and scooped out this wet, warm, cheese-covered rice and hurled it down onto the table in front of him and was like, there you go, and walked away. Because I was like, look, dude, like, you've ordered this food. I've gone out of my way to deliver you something that's not on the menu. I've been as polite as possible and accommodating as possible, and you're verbally abusing me. And it's not okay. It's not okay. Like, for anyone listening, it's not okay to yell at waiters. Anyways, the entire restaurant went silent, and I went out back, sat by the cold freezer out in the back alley. And eventually my manager, who was another young woman my age, managed to calm this guy down because he was railing in the restaurant. And she came out back and she informed me that I would need to apologize, which at first I refused to do on principle, but then eventually, just out of pity for her and to get this idiot out of the restaurant, I reluctantly did go and say, I'm sorry that I lost my temper, sir, and that we had no food to your liking or something. I'm sure I can sort of remember the feeling of speaking through gritted teeth. Anyways, like in retrospect, there's probably some kind of a lesson in this story about what I could have done differently to de-escalate and exhibit professionalism. But I swear to God, if I'm being honest with you, I have never once regretted throwing that rice.